Hi, hope we're all really well, and I'm just going to do an update on the Sew for the Soul and where I'm up to with my piece, and just talk through a couple of different things that you could start doing with yours. I've set the challenge this week for people to take a photo of their favourite section and drop it me in an email so I can do another video. We've had 2 community videos so far. The first one was just people that are busy stitching and just looking at where they are. The second one was where you're working. I've still got a few more of those to add in, and I'll add those into the next video. And what I thought, because quite a few people now have got quite a lot of work done, I thought it would be lovely just to see close-ups of people's work, just to see where they've got up to and what their favourite bit is. So I've made a decision with my piece. I'm not going to add anything else to it. So I've got sections now that are at the beginning that are totally complete. I'm happy with them. I'm not really going to do anything else to them at all. And then what I've done is I have just added my last section. So with some fabrics that I've got, I just thought I'll finish it off right down to the bottom, and then I know I've got somewhere that I'm going to work to. So this has been the section, I think, that I've been working on since last time I spoke to you. So we talked about edges and doing edges. One of the things that I did say that I would do is I'd do a close-up video of stitching these, so I'll try and get that sorted. One of the things that I added, and I think it was on my Instagram, I did a very quick video about dyeing bits and pieces for your piece. So I've got my linen buttons here, and I had a little piece of tatting that was lovely, but it was all rainbow coloured. So I have these paints that are Kohinoor dyes. They look just like the watercolour, but if you get the dye, they're such a gorgeous paint to work with, and you just paint them straight on. So I just dyed the tatting different colours and just painted some of the linen buttons just to match my piece. So I've got some extra bits just to start adding in, because I've loved adding all the buttons, but I just think because they're all white or an off-white, it'd be quite nice to add some coloured ones in. So they may have to go in a little bit earlier as well, but I might still add them in to where we are. We also talked about couching things down, so laying things on and then stitching over the top. And we were beading, and I know quite a lot of people have been doing a lot of beading at the moment, which is looking absolutely fantastic with people's work. So I've got the end of my piece, because I just thought this was meant to take me all year, and if I'm going to go all year with it, it's just going to be ridiculously long. So I thought I'm going to stop beginning of May now, so probably June I'll bring this piece to a bit of a close, bit of a conclusion. And then, like I said before, I've got another project that I've just busy started doing some filming for at the moment that I'll start launching when this one's completed. So where we're up to, what I'm going to do next. So I've got these dyed bits that I could start adding. The next thing that I thought that would be lovely, which I know a couple of people have done, and a few of my friends that are doing this as well have mentioned it, is possibly adding some writing and some words into it as a piece of work. So there's a number of different ways that you could do this. You could use little letter stamps. So if you have stamps, you could stamp directly onto your piece of work, or you could stamp on separate fabric, bits of paper, and attach those. So that's one nice way of doing it. Another way that you could is with a typewriter, if you have one. If you get a piece of cotton and just iron it onto, I tend to iron it onto a piece of Bonder web, usually because I'm going to iron it onto a piece of fabric. So you could do that, or you could iron it onto some freezer paper, pop it through your typewriter, and you could type some words. And then one of the other things that I've been doing is stitching onto separate little bits of fabric, some little words, just using a back stitch. I love the work of Karen Garfin. If you don't know her work, you need to go and look it up. She does the most exquisite hand embroidery, and the bit that's always fascinated me are the words that she stitches. They are so tiny. I'm not quite sure how she does it, and I just thought little bits like this would be lovely just to hide some little words in. You could do some really big ones, and it could be about what's going on at the moment in the world. I think mine's going to be about home and hope and family and things like that. So I'm going to start hiding some little words in and amongst. I don't want mine to stand out too much, so I do want them sort of to disappear. So if I was going to do some stitching, I just need to get a needle. For my stitching, because I want it to be quite small and tiny, I'm using my silk threads, but you could use machine embroidery thread, anything at all. And it's totally up to you how you want to do this, whether you want to just go straight in and stitch, or you want to write some words first. There are other things that you could do. If you wanted to do some slightly bigger words, you could applique them on, so you could cut them out. They could even be written on paper, and there's no reason why you couldn't have paper on here as well. Okay, so if I was going to do something just here, so I could have the word hope, because it's got an O and a curl in it, I think I might just pencil it on just so that I've got something just to follow. And just think about the size of your text and the sort of shapes that you're going to use. So think about the shape, hopefully you can see that you're filling, and try and look at it so that it fills the shape. And then it's just a case of starting one place and just doing a really small back stitch. So with a back stitch, you just move a little bit further on from where your last stitch went down, come back up, and then just go back down the hole where that stitch was, and you just continue. So you can keep adding bits. Now, even though I've extended my piece on now, just find the end of that, I'm still continuing to add things from previous challenges. So I've got Suffolk puffs that I know that I want to add. I've got some more of my hexagons, buttons. I've got my dyed buttons. I keep popping in bits of lace. I absolutely love working with lace and adding little bits of vintage lace in to my piece as well. Okay, there we go. So then I'm going to come up the other. I've got another one there. Okay. I'm doing these quite big, really, but it still takes some looking at. And I've got my old specs on rather than my new specs, so I'm not 100% in focus, but we're managing. Okay, so I hope this is really still keeping everybody busy and entertained. I know a lot of people have totally agreed with me about how it is very addictive. I'm finding it quite hard to put it down, so I'm having to limit myself now to just doing it on an evening when I'm sat just watching the telly, because otherwise the day can just totally disappear. I'm going to do the little line across the H. There we go. So it's just carrying on. Tiny back stitch. You don't have to do it in silks or machine threads. I might do some of my words a little bit bigger. You don't have to do a back stitch. They can look quite nice in a chain stitch or anything really. I think the reason I've just gone for a back stitch is it's just quite delicate, because I want these words sort of to be hidden within one piece of work. A little bit like we're hiding at the moment in isolation. Okay, so that's my H, and then I'll carry on with the O, the P and the E, with the word hope. Hopefully you can see that. No, it's not ideal. The light's really funny today. Just a little bit tricky just to see things. It's either in shadow or in full sun. Even though it's not sunny, it's just a bit dull and smoky. So I've got that one. Then I've got my tiny little home that I've done there. Really nice contrast between the grey and the yellow. Just really makes a bit of a difference, makes things pop out. So that's going to be popped in there somewhere. So I'll carry on with these, and then I'll come back, and before I finish the video off, I'll show you an example of just some different techniques that I've done and just show you some of these actually finished off. It's a lovely afternoon and I'm carrying on with my Sew for the Soul, so I thought I'd do a bit of filming outside. Hopefully you'll be able to see stuff. This is my patio where I'm busy sat working from. Such a lovely afternoon. So as I mentioned last time, we are looking at adding text. So here's the hope that I continued stitching, tiny little back stitch, and then I'd got one of my hexes that hadn't got anything in it, so using again a contrasting thread, you can work with that. But you don't just have to sew on your actual piece, you could get an embroidery hoop. I've got a little bit of my yellow fabric that one of my friends gave me, and I've started doing a little bit of stitching because it's quite pale. I was able just to write on in pencil first, so I don't know if you can see, it's a little bit there, the pencil just left over. So again, just using a back stitch. So I've got the word home, family, and then I have some letter stamps. Just got an ink, could use any type of ink. This is just one of the Versacolour ones, and the two sets that I've got is just an alphabet stamp. I think I got that from probably the Range in the UK, and these pick these up usually, loads of different ones when they're on sale. Just get loads of different styles. Some of them work better than others, some aren't that clear. So I've just started doing my So Happy. So I'm just going to do loads and loads of different things. If you happen to have one, I have a typewriter. You can pop in some fabric. I've just put a little bit of Bonder Web on the back just to stabilise it, but you could just put it on some iron-on wax paper or anything like that. So if I lift that up there. So there's a little bit of typing going on, so I can just cut those out. I could iron them on, but because this is so textured, I'll probably cut them out just a little bit longer than they are and just put a couple of stitches either side just to hold them in. So if you've got a typewriter, you could do that. Obviously you can print it out of a computer onto fabric, the fabrics that go through your printer. So this is the next big task, is to start looking at adding some words. I'm going to hide mine in and amongst, but I know a couple of you out there have already added text, and we've got some lovely big words that are sort of snaking down your pieces. The other thing then that I've done with my piece, like I've mentioned before, is I have decided where it's going to end now. So I've attached some more of my fabric, and I've been doing my basic stitching, so going right the way back to the start, just with straight stitch, just tacking everything down, and then I'll just continue to work back through. It's no pressure on adding bits here and there. No bits that I haven't added in yet are the bits that I dyed myself. So I'll probably start looking at that. I'll probably go back into all my beads. I had these all in a mixed box, and then I found this sorting box. So I spent ages the other night sorting them all back out, which was very satisfying. And that's sort of where we're up to at the moment. And once I've got all these attached, I'll give you another little update to finish the video. I hope everybody is at home with their family and that you're so happy. Okay, so we've added everything in to the piece now as far as text goes. I might still add a little bit more, but I thought I'd just show you as best I can. What I'll do on the video is, after this section, I'll put a couple of stills on just as these sections. So I've got my bit that I did there on my typewriter. So some reason my camera is not focusing that crackingly today. I've just done a little straight stitch just around the edge just to hold that on. We've got Hope, which was the bit that I started on originally, little back stitch, looking at how you can fill just some of the gaps that you might have. Was particularly happy with my So Happy using the stamp. I think that's worked really nice. And again, I've just done a tiny straight stitch. I've used my silk threads just to stitch these bits on. And it's all really, really coming together now. There's love on the little hexagon. I think that really stands out. I really, really like that. I think it's ever so sweet. I've got my family stitched on. So I've just done words that just mean something to me at this moment in time while we've been at home. Talking of home, we also have home stitched on. So these ones were stitched onto separate fabric and then I've stitched them on. Because you've already got quite a bit of cotton wadding and lots of different layers, it sort of quilts it, so they sort of poof up off the surface. So what I'm going to do now, I'm looking forward to this evening actually, it's probably about 4 o'clock here in the UK. I'm going to start at the bottom of my piece, get all my materials downstairs, probably get a film on, and I'm going to sit and work my way from the bottom all the way around my piece and just try and finish off and add things as I'm going along. I have cheated a little bit, so when we were talking about edges, I've put a little bit of my tatting just here on the edge, just stitched it on just to give it a little bit of an edge in. I do still like some of these frayed edges. I had a couple of pieces of I think it's like a bit of a suede that's had circles cut out of it that my friend Jane gave me, so I've stitched that on as well. And then just going back to French knots, maybe some bullion knots, stitching onto little bits of lace just to add things on. And just really just working through every little bit. Oh, there's a little one there, Happy, that I've done. Don't know if you can see that, but like I say, I will put some still shots just of the text, just so that you can see it. I'm busy building up my bling again. I really do love it when it starts looking like the seaside and crustaceans. Just lots of different textures and colours just added on. You can sit for ages doing things like that. I was sat doing that last night, and I would say that little section there probably took me a good hour. So I think if everybody started to think about how many hours they've put into this piece, it's quite scary, but it has meant that we've been able to use up some of the time that we've got at the moment and making the most of it. So like I say, I'll put a few stills on of the text on the video just after this section, and then I'm going to sit and finish it, and then the last little bit on the video will be the finale with it all finished, and I'll talk you through, and I've got an idea of where I'm going to put this, so hopefully if that works I'll get a picture of that presented as well. Okay, so drum roll, we've finished, or I've finished, or at least I think I've finished my piece of work. Quite surprised that I'm at this stage now, because it was going to take me a full year to do this piece of work, so I just thought I'd take you through it all. I've measured it, it's just short of 2 meters, which I'm quite impressed with. I don't really know what I'd planned originally when I was doing this. It was just originally just for me to sit and stitch on a Sunday evening just for an hour or so, just to calm my brain, and it's definitely worked, especially with the current situation that we're in. If you're watching this video and it's not 2020, this was when the coronavirus pandemic hit the country and we were on lockdown. So I continued this particular project and added lots of different things in. So impressed with everybody's work, and have a look at some of the previous videos just to see little snapshots of what everybody's been doing. So this is my piece. I just thought I'd talk you through all the different bits and pieces. So it started off in January with a piece approximately that long, gathering my stash of fabrics together, lots of different colours. I went for yellows, greys and some little bits of white in there. Mustard is one of my favourite colours. This is a lot of the colours that I'm wearing at the moment. Never ever thought I'd be a yellow person, but I'm absolutely loving the yellow. So we started off with the stash, laying little bits of fabric, lots of different directions, some bits cut out. So we'd got shapes that we were using. I started using a circle, so where I've got my positives and negatives, they were both used on the piece of work. And just starting with a straight stitch. So looking back at Borrow and Shishiko and slow stitching, just looking at using a straight stitch, just tram lines of stitches following the different shapes. And you'll notice other bits in here, but these were worked back into as I added other challenges and other tasks as we went through our particular piece of work. So this was the first bit that was done in January. And then we moved into February and looking at Suffolk puffs. Looking at them in lots of different ways. I've learnt that they're also called yo-yos, which is quite nice, always to find out different terminology. And just looking at how you can use them. So just using them with their raw edges bent in. You can have the raw edges out as well if you want, so you end up with very fluffy edges. But looking at stuffing them, popping little bits of fabric inside. Later on when I came back and worked into these, I added extra embellishments, little bits of stitching. Had them on their own with stitching around, but also added them one on top of another because it reminds me a little bits of limpets at the seaside. So moving on to the next section, this one I really focused with the stitching. So starting with lines of stitches that went around my Suffolk puffs, getting pieces of lace and interspersing those so they fitted in and amongst everything that was going on. And then I think we'd got to about here with my length of fabric, so it's quite long at that point. Okay, so we've got quite a bit on there, and we started talking about knots. Knots are something that I absolutely love in hand embroidery. Pistol stitch, which is a straight stitch with a French knot on the end. French knots, colonial knots, which end up like figure of eights, and they end up a little bit more loopy and a little bit more textured. And also the lovely bullion knot, which gives you like these little wiggly worms, sort of they loop up and over, so it adds another dimension to your piece of work. So it was a case of then coming back into my piece and looking at where I could start adding knots. So little lines of French knots here, the little grey dots there, they're all little French knots going down. Where I've got the lace, adding little bits of knots, got French knots there. Working out from one of my Suffolk puffs, so the little lines here have got French knots, we've got little pistol stitch. Also using different lengths of, sorry not lengths, thickness of thread. So this was done with my silk threads, whereas some of these were done with the linen and cotton threads. Massive clusters, so this little white section here is all French knots, just filling in that section, and it just adds so much texture to your piece of work. Working with a pistol stitch in different directions, so I've got it going one way with my cotton thread, the other way with my silk thread. So it was going back into and working into the sections that you'd already done, so you begin to layer and add a lot more to your piece of work. So we got the knots. Then it was about adding another section and adding a little bit more fabric. So the top section here was really busy, it's really textured and really thick. So the next piece that we were coming to, I decided to go for, I call them breathing spaces in pieces of work. So it's a little bit calmer, there's not as much stuff, but it still takes just as much time. You just think about the layers being a little bit flatter rather than really textured. So with the next section, it was looking at hexagons and paper piecing. So creating paper templates and wrapping fabric around them, and then stitching these on. And I think this adds such a lovely dimension. It's very different to the Suffolk puffs because it's really nice and flat and it's really calm. Still playing around with my stitching, so I started getting a little bit of stitching that was a bit more figurative, so adding little scrolls. Using your pistol stitch, so with this one I had put in a button in the middle to give me a template, and then did the pistol stitch around the edge and then removed the button so that you get the piece of fabric. Then I've done one here where the button's been left. So that was pinched from an idea of my friend Jane, who'd done that on her piece, and I really loved it. So I did ask her first, could I pinch it? But it's such a lovely, lovely technique. Playing around with your straight stitching to give little star shapes. Adding buttons was next. Loads and loads of buttons. So I have loads of linen buttons. I'm a little bit obsessed with linen buttons. I collect them from all over the place, and just adding them in, and it's amazing how many different types of linen button you can get. So you can get them with little metal rings with your buttonholes in. There are some that are totally covered, so they give you really, really nice disc shapes to work with. So they were quite nice. I've done those in a few sections. And then you get ones that are just totally flat. So it's just like a round disc of linen. So they were done with a blanket stitch around the edge, and they look a little bit like cartwheels. So adding buttons in there. I decided just to stick with linen buttons, but one of the things that I did do is I did paint some of my linen buttons different colours. So I've sort of got that continuity going through my piece. So adding the buttons and everything were on there. Also adding other embellishments as well, so different things that I've added. I've got some little hook and eyes. I just did the eyes. I thought the hooks probably catch into things. I've got some little toggles that I've added, just a little bit of 3D in there, and tiny safety pins, which are really cute, and different types of beads as well. So I've got some long beads, actual washers that I found in my stash, different shaped beads, but really building up with my beads, lots of different shapes and the way that you stitch the bead on. So some of them are done very traditionally, just going through, whereas others I've come through the middle and then done little star shapes just off the edge. So if you have a look at some of my previous posts, or go onto my Instagram, you'll be able to see just a little bit more detail some of these sections. And in the video that's a closer look, I've done some photos of some slightly closer sections of my piece of work. So we've done our paper piecing, and then we were adding more and more sections, really embellishing things. So kept coming back in, so I've still got some of my Suffolk puffs being added, some of my hexes, continued to add fabric, so it was getting longer and longer and longer. And I got to a stage where I just thought, you know what, I've got to decide where the end's going to be. So the last bit of fabric that I'd done, I was going to go to 2 meters. So I'm probably about that far off 2 meters, but I just thought it was getting a bit bonkers, so I decided just to stop it. So originally I'd got a piece of fabric at the bottom that was just all frayed, but then when I laid this piece of lace over the top that came around my sole for the sole that I did on the typewriter, I just really liked that edge. So I think one of the things that I've loved with this is there has been no plan. There was no planning with this at all. It's just been about playing and just enjoying stitch and getting out all those things that you have. So I've got some little bits of vintage tatting that I've dyed so it fits, some bits of cutout suede. I even went on and started buying little scraps of fabric, bits of lace, and then started adding text. So we've got the word hope and happy, so happy. I love the play on words with so instead of so on there. It's one of my little things that I really like. And just adding all these beautiful bits of lace that I've had in my stash. I have baskets, which I know when looking at everybody's photos, everybody's got. And it just always seems such a shame that they are in a basket. So I'm so happy that I've got all these bits and pieces just out now. And oh, edges, that was another thing that we did. The bullion knot edges. I know I'd said about putting a video on, which I haven't done. I will try and get that done just to show you how to do these loopy bullion knots. But basically it is a bullion knot that just comes out and goes back in, but you make it quite long so it curls over. Edges could be bits of lace that you've got on there. I had another one where I'd done some little loops. So this is a little loop of thread, and then you do a blanket stitch around it so that you end up with these little loops that come off the edge. I tried it here, but they went a little bit bonkers, so I ended up stitching the loops down, and I quite like that actually, how they've come into the piece of work. And that's one of the things that I've loved seeing everybody else's pieces. Everybody's got their own passions, interests, things that they particularly love doing, and it's inspired me with loads of different ideas, which is why I'm going to call a halt to this particular piece of work and start a new project which will be coming at the end of May. And it's following along the same sorts of lines, so I'll be giving prompts and ideas, but it's not going to be a long strip. It's going to be something a little bit different because I wanted something a little bit more contained, because I do know at some point I will be going back to work, so I won't be able to do as much stitching as I've loved doing, even though online teaching, especially teaching art and embroidery, is not the easiest thing, I am discovering. And I will be quite glad to get back to a classroom and actually see my students and talk about what we've done and see what they've been up to as well. So this was originally on a bobbin, and I think one of the other reasons that I decided just to finish it where I did was that the bobbin was getting a little bit fat. So you can see how it's gone sort of beyond, and I do love how it wraps round. I love how every time you turn it you see a different section. I haven't done anything to the back of my piece, so I'll show you the back. I think because I'd used the cotton wadding, a lot of the stitching has actually disappeared into the piece of work. So you get some bits, and sometimes I quite like the backs. I think there can be little areas of the back where it's sort of like that unconscious stitching, and it can be quite nice. I'm not going to cover it. I am going to hang this at home, and I will put a picture of where I'm hanging it. I've just, while we've been off, I've decorated the hall downstairs, and it just happens to match. So there we go. So I'm going to be, I'll put some pictures on. The last thing I'd just like to say is thank you so much to everybody on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. People that have shared my project, have joined in. It's been lovely seeing videos of people's work. And I think one of the things I'd like to do right at the end of this is get some photographs of everybody's pieces, whether you decide, some people have put them into concertina books, they've put them on bobbins, they've got them hung. Some people are onto their third one. So if you do have your piece and you've joined from the beginning, or you've worked quite quickly and caught up and you've finished, I'd love to see as many photos of finished pieces, so then I can do a Sew for the Soul community video just to bring everything together and just let everybody see what we've all been doing. I hope you'll join me with the next project. I'll keep putting some little hints on my Instagram page and my Facebook page of little clues as to what's coming up and some sneaky peeks. But for now, thank you for joining in with Sew for the Soul. I hope it's helped you with your mindfulness and just having a little bit of a breather and having something to do while you've been either at home or on lockdown somewhere else. I think the community, it just shows that through stitch, no matter where we all live, we are all together. See you soon.